Yo, this is New Jack, the original gangster, and right now you're listening to InYourHeadOnline.com. Believe it. If you don't, I'll stab your ass.
All right, we're back. Welcome to In Your Head Wrestling Radio. I'm the Internet icon, the pride of the Pilgrims, Jackie Jones, along with my right-hand man.
1-inch biceps, the power goat. Bah! How about that? Huh?
Not too bad, not too bad.
I'm picking it up.
I think so. Taking his return to the show tonight. He's probably wondering why right now. We have the franchise, Shane Douglas, back with us. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. How you guys heading tonight?
Not too good, but I'm better now that we get in the line. Well, let everybody know if you guys want to call in and ask the franchise a question yourself, it's 508-644-8503. And we got a lot of stuff to talk about Extreme Reunion, but before we get to that, we do have a surprise caller on the line, so let's get to him.
Beautiful.
Bill?
Hello. Yes, sir. Hello. You hear me? Yeah.
We got a superstar Bill Dundee's calling in to talk to Shane.
How you doing, superstar?
I'm doing real good. How about y'all?
Long time no see.
I'm telling you.
I just saw Bill last week down in Crossfire Wrestling down in Nashville. First time I see him in years. Looks as good. I said, how is it all these guys are not aging and I'm aging at like dog years, you know?
No, you look good, brother. What the hell? How come you're late anyway? I just saw this thing on the computer and I said, oh, Shane's on. I'll call in. And they said, well, he's late. He ain't here yet.
You're not supposed to tell him that. I said that.
But anyway.
How was everything?
Everything's good with me. Hell, who knows? I just had my knee done. I was down there selling the book. You saw it. It's just, I don't know if I'll ever go back wrestling or not. I think I will, but who knows?
It was great last week for the people that weren't there that saw, we had Mick Foley in doing one of his last appearances on the independent shows. And, Mick had made one of the all-time great exits from the ECW arena by doing his version, I'll say, of the Fargo strut out of the arena. And we asked him to do it again. He said the only way he would do it is if superstar Bill Dundee did it with him, and he called him out, and Bill Dundee was classy enough to come out and do it, and got a huge pop from the night. It was great to see. It was fun to be part of.
Yeah, and picking Fargo's hometown to do it in. But anyway, I think the people enjoyed it. And Jack said he wasn't too good at it, and he wasn't lying, was he?
I told you, you're in for a treat. I told you.
Oh, yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed him doing it. Hell.
I wish I would have seen that. That sounds pretty sweet.
It does.
Classic stuff.
Well, we're going to have Bill back on sometime to talk about his book soon, so thank you for calling in, Mr. Dundee.
All right. Well, Shane, I just wanted to talk. Had you ever hadn't seen your name there, I don't know, I would have dialed the number, but I just wanted to say hi to you and good luck on whatever you're doing. And anybody wants to get my book, just go to BillDundeeBook.com, and I'll talk to you all later. Thank you very much.
And I tell you, anybody out there wants a good read on wrestling, check that book out because that guy's been around and he knows all the stories, the inside stories and the back stories. I'm sure it's a great read.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it myself. Now, we're going to get into the Extreme Reunions coming up April 28th, and that's in Pennsylvania, National Guard Armory. You want to let everybody know exactly what's going to be going on?
Yeah, well, as much as we can. Look, the idea came from the concept was born out of where our business has gone. I've been in the business long enough now, 30 years. I've seen it go full circle. In 92, when the ECW concept began to be kicked around in Philadelphia, in the old Eastern Championship Wrestling, none of us had any idea what it would become. Thankful that it did, but we knew we had a concept that we wanted to do something different, to bring some of the excitement back to wrestling. Guys, 1849 male demographic had all but abandoned wrestling at that point because of the stupidity of the characters, the cartoon, BS, the 12 to 13-year-old kid concept, which was great for them, not so good for 18 to 49 guys like us. Mm-hmm. And we decided to shoot for them to see if we could bring them back to the table, and I think we did that, and in the process revolutionized the industry. Vince would soon follow suit with his Attitude Era, and both WCW and WWF would try their versions of hardcore divisions, which were done awfully, poorly and awfully. But I've now seen it go full circle, where we saw the rise of ECW, and the unfortunate fall because of the money side, the business side of the company wasn't being kept as it should have been. But we've now seen the business get back to where it was then in '92. If you look at the parallels of wrestling in 2012 and 1992, it's the exact same industry, albeit far worse today. You know, the wrestling always goes in these ebb and flows, highs and lows, and we're in one of the lowest lows. We've lost 78% of our audience, and I could go into all the numbers and bore the hell out of everybody. Suffice it to say that Vince McMahon and Dixie Carter have done a pretty damn poor job of tending to our business. The fans are saying that. That's not my opinion. That's the opinion of the 78% that have tuned out and gone and found other things. So there's something that needs to be done, and I think much akin to '93 when it gave rise to that little bingo hall company in the first place, needs to be brought back. The same thing, the freshness of the storylines. We used to tell the fans. I remember my early promos. I used to say, "Bring all your pessimism with you. Walk in the front door. If at the end of the night you walk out saying that was as fake and phony as anything I've ever seen, that was garbage, this is BS, we'll give you your money back." Not one fan in 7 years ever asked for their money back because we told them to bring that pessimism and their weapons, and they did. And they knew we weren't BSing them. They knew we were out there putting our bodies and our asses on the line to give them an entertaining product, and they followed suit with it. And the business is right back where it was then. So I decided what better thing to do. You know, ECW, the demise of ECW came right at the turn of the century, and unfortunately we didn't get a chance to see what that would have blossomed into. And most of the guys in the company, I'm 48 years old. You know, whenever I was a kid breaking into wrestling, people in their 40s, 45, 6, 7, 8, that was their prime earning years. That was when you finally got to the point where you could ascend into the main events and make that big money. Most of the guys were in their late 20s and 30s and early 30s. Mm-hmm. So I think the demise of the company came far too early. I would have loved to have seen what it would have become. And that's what this idea was born out of. Going back to these guys and saying, get your butts in shape. That's why we booked the show out for 3.5 months, to give the guys an opportunity to get in shape, to get themselves right, to make sure that they're going to be able to go out and do the types of things that we used to do before. And at the same time, as we're looking backward to pay homage to the legacy of ECW, we're looking forward to relaunching the entire brand. So it's really a two-way show, looking back and saying salute to what ECW was, and looking forward as we relaunch it.
Yeah, now you say when you relaunch it, you're looking forward to this not just being a one-time show, to be like a new promotion? Absolutely.
Look, no revolution was ever done in one night. And if we're going to revolutionize the industry again as we did in '93, the only way we can do that is that we have the longevity to be able to introduce new characters, to be able to introduce the storylines and get the people sitting at home, online, on the blogs, emotionally invested in them. That's what wrestling is not doing today. I wish I had half of the athleticism of most of these kids today. I'm amazed at what the kids in the business today can do, but I'm also disgusted by the drivel that's being written for them. I want the opportunity to be able to write for some of these kids and see what that athleticism combined with a great storyline will equal.
You know, since you've been on like some of the indie shows, and you said you're on the show with Bill Dundee, and have you seen some like younger guys that you'd like to have a place that they could really shine?
A definitive hell yes. I've been out there keeping my eyes open for about the last year. We've kicked this idea around for some time, in substance for about 3.5, 4 months now. So this has not been something that was conceived a few weeks ago and we're just going to throw it out there and see. We've gone and we put together a team that on the corporate side of things is an impressive team of people that have a breadth of experience through internet and social medias, through traditional medias, in the wrestling business. My partner and I have a combined close to 60 years in the wrestling business. So we've kicked this idea quite a while, kicked it around quite a while, and all the while that we've been kicking it around, I've been out there, on the independent shows, paying close attention to who I think could fit into that style. I mean, let's face it, not everybody can, not everybody wants to. It takes a different kind of performer to want to go out there and lay their body on the line the way that we used to do it. But that said, I've seen several talents that I'm really excited about.
Do you think, no matter how good you are, if you're working with guys like your same experience level, you could never really improve unless you've worked with some people who have been around longer than you, could teach you some new things?
Absolutely. I mean, look, the franchise character became what it became in large part because I worked with Terry Funk and learned from Terry Funk, worked for that time with Ricky Steamboat, and learned from Ricky Steamboat, and coming up wrestled pretty much every big name star, of the generation prior to mine, coming up the ladder. So the franchise character was the end result of Troy Martin's experiences for 11 years prior to that in the wrestling business. Same thing holds for these kids. I mean, if you take some of the kids in the business today and you look at how outstanding athletes they are, if you combine that with putting them in the ring with the equivalent of a Ricky Steamboat, a Terry Funk, a Bruno Sammartino, a Ric Flair, an Arn Anderson, a Dusty Rhodes, a Jake the Snake Roberts, I mean, go down the list of all the Hardy Races. If you take those kids and put them in the ring with them, how can they not learn?
Mm-hmm. Last week it was the last show at the ECW Arena, and you're speaking of young guys in the business. Did you happen to see Sami Callihan's promo about ECW?
I hadn't. I'd heard about it. I'd heard bits and pieces about it. A little preface note up front. We're hearing bits and pieces that it may not be a done deal that the arena closed. We're going with the premise that it is, and that's why we booked another building that's just a safeguard against possibly not being able. We'd hate the last minute have to find another building or whatever.
Yeah.
But I would just say up front that what a sad thing for the arena. That little bingo hall that ECW made so famous to suddenly not want anything to do with wrestling seems sort of sad to me.
Definitely. Now, what was it like just wrestling in the ECW arena?
In the first few months, in hindsight, we can all look back and say what a great success we were. Mm-hmm. But the early days, the first 2, maybe 3 months, we were going out and literally standing out in front of the building and handing out free coupons for beer and hot dogs to get people into the building for those first few months. It was about 6 months in that we began to realize that we were turning people away. And from that point forward, that the arena every 3 weeks became it became our lifeline. That was the money that the fans spent at that building every 3 weeks became the lifeline of ECW all the way to the end. That we knew to have a big infusion of cash to the very end days of ECW because of that show. So the fans that came there and spent their money, take your hats off to yourselves because it was them that made ECW what it was.
Mm-hmm. I think there's something, would you agree, that's missing from wrestling is like the emotional attachment to like a promotion. I was a huge fan of ECW, and like I really wanted them to succeed. I was really excited when they got a pay-per-view, and I was really disappointed when they went away. And I don't know if anyone's really that attached to like TNA or any promotion around today.
No, and it's sad. I mean, and that's not for lack of having the talent.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a kid coming up in the business, Jack, I remember being, the thing that was always kicked around the dressing room was, if you have talent and you have a network and you have $100 million, you can launch a wrestling company. And unfortunately, Dixie Carter has definitively disproven that theory. Mm-hmm. From my sources inside TNA tells me that they're now approaching the $150 million mark spent to date. Mm-hmm. And if you go back and you compare the two products, ECW spent, I believe the number is $8.27 million in the 7.5 years that ECW was open. But if you compare the products and the legacies of the two companies, if TNA were to close today, there is no comparison. ECW launched and created how many superstars, bankable superstars that could headline a pay-per-view, could sell a pay-per-view. TNA hasn't produced one. With all deference to Bobby Roode and AJ Styles and guys that I'm a mark for. I mean, I'm a mark for what they bring to the table. TNA has failed them miserably, not the other way around. TNA has failed those kids because by this point, with their skills, those kids should be bona fide, bankable stars, and they're not. So the comparison keeps coming back in my head because the first day I met Dixie Carter, her quote to me was, "Why would we want to copy ECW after all they failed?" Well, we'll talk 10 years from now and see if anybody wants to see a TNA reunion.
Yeah. Well,
It's laughable, I know.
Yeah, well, I was just, like, they brought in all these people, like Hulk Hogan, Flair, I mean, just Sting, just like all these huge stars, and they get the same TV ratings they had with, relative unknown guys. I think less people buy the pay-per-views. How does that make any sense?
Well, if they had a time machine, which Albert Einstein says could be feasible, if Dixie Carter has a time machine that Panda's created and nobody's talking about, then they could go back to 1984, and that would make perfect sense. Hogan and Flair.
Right.
I'll let him in on a little secret here. Don't tell anybody else this, but the year's 2012,
Right.
and so it'd be like the Pittsburgh Steelers firing Ben Roethlisberger to bring back Terry Bradshaw. Love him, fantastic. 4 Super Bowls he brought to Pittsburgh. I don't think there's a there's a person in the Steeler Nation today that wants to see Bradshaw back manning the helm.
Yeah. I said this before the show, too, is ECW, like, you really believed the ECW guys, Taz, yourself, Raven, RVD, all the guys, like, you really believed in these guys. They were the ECW guys. You thought they were better than anybody in WWE and WCW. And TNA, there's nobody. They had, like, guys, you kind of felt that for Samoa Joe for a little while, but now it's you don't really think of anybody as, like, this is my TNA guy.
Yeah, and again, it's not because of the failure of the kids. The stuff they're being written is god-awful. They've got those kids down there. When I went to the pay-per-view a few years ago in Auburn Hills, I saw everybody in the back walking around with a piece of paper in their hand. And they would, take 3 or 4 steps reading, and then they'd stop and look up at the ceiling and regurgitate to themselves. And I couldn't figure out what everybody was reading. I thought, is there a memo or something that we're all supposed to be reading? Because I didn't have anything to read.
Yeah.
And so I went into the promo room with Vince Russo. And he asked me to come over and sit down with him and watch some of the kids doing their promos. And I forget who it was, but a young girl came in to do her promo, a good-looking girl. She came in and sat down. It's like I could tell by the look on her face that she was about ready to throw up. So I walked over to talk to her. I said, hey, just relax. Just us in this room. Just have fun with it. This is what we do. And she got up and she started her promo. She was shaking like a leaf to begin with, but she got up and she started doing her promo. And in the middle of the promo, she messed up like an ah or an ah, like some conjunction, like some unimportant word in the promo.
Mm-hmm.
And she stopped herself. She went, oh, MF, and she stopped. And I went, no, don't stop until you hear the word cut. You go. It shouldn't look like a pre-rehearsed sketch. It should look like it's coming from you naturally.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the moral of the story. And TNA and WWE both, they've got these kids so afraid that they may fart incorrectly, and so they're going around and they're asking 27 questions and waiting for them to be handed a script on how to fart instead of just going out and being the character. And that's what's missing. That's what we are damn striven to bring back to the business, is letting these people be who they're going to be. Let the character develop, and it may not be perfect, but in the end, you'll end up with a character that's believable, that's realistic, and that's compelling, not this garbage we've been getting.
Doesn't it just make it more work for not like a better product to like totally script everything everyone's saying?
Absolutely. I mean, when I was a kid breaking, I hate saying that because I feel like it makes me sound like I'm 9,000, like I'm Methuselah or something. But the business has changed so dramatically from old school to new school, and those two phrases get thrown around with way overabundance. Most kids, I've met very few, if any, kids in the business today that have any damn idea what old school is. But in the old school, when you were coming up in wrestling, keep in mind that the buildings were kayfabe, meaning the heels were dressing on one side, the faces were dressing on the other side. You couldn't walk around through the fans to get over there to talk to the person you were working with to set up 97 spots and talk about all day. You may, on a rare occasion, be able to grab one of the referees and send an idea over, but not 10 ideas, maybe one. So you had to go to the ring and wrestle a match, perform a match that you hadn't heard one spot of.
No, I'm still on.
You did it by body language.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that are, today when the kids are going out, they sit in the back and they talk all day about their match. You do this and I'll do this, and after you do this, that, and the other thing, I'll do this to you. And, oh, God, What if the fans aren't buying it? What if the audience says, this is garbage, I don't like it? Back when we were kids coming up, you damn well better be able to audible on the fly and give the fans what they're buying, because that's your job, is to entertain the people in the building that spent their hard-earned money to buy a ticket to come in and watch that, not just regurgitate what you spoke about all day.
Mm-hmm. Now, before I told everybody calling, if it's 508-644-8503. There's a lot of people on hold, so I want to get to a couple of these calls. James, you have a question for Shane Douglas?
Yes, I do.
All right, let's hear.
Shane,
how you doing, James?
I remember when you did the Dean Douglas character back in WWE in the mid-'90s.
Yep.
And why did you want to do that character for?
Well, the way the character was originally pitched to me was that character, the reason where that character came from, at least what I was told, was that Vince was getting very angry that the wrestlers, from the top of the card to the bottom, were not executing the way he thought they should. They were getting into this, like, for instance, one of the points that he made to me in one of my meetings with him at that time was that Bret Hart says he's the best there is, was, and ever will be. But the only time he grapevined the leg was when he was going for an actual finish, never a false finish. So Vince felt, and I agree with him, then, and I still agree with him, when you're only grapevining, when you know the finish is coming, in time you begin to desensitize the audience, and the audience begins to catch on. He's not grapevining the leg, so you lose some of that emotion of the fan getting jumped to the edge of their seat. Come on, kick out, kick out. You lose that magic of what the business is supposed to be, how our job is to get the fans excited and bring them to the edge of their seats, stand them up and sit them down, piss them off, and get them to pop. So Vince felt that if the Dean character would come in and sort of point out these foibles, you know, this, that, and the other thing. Hey, Bret, you say you're the best is, was, and ever will be. Why don't you ever grapevine a leg? That the boys would begin to tighten their work up. That's the way it was pitched to me. I was told prior to going and signing that I could grade whoever I wanted, give whatever grade I wanted, diagram whatever outtakes I wanted out of the matches. And yet when I got there, it became something vastly different. Aside from the ridiculous costume they had the Dean character wearing, they also then wanted me to go out and give grades like TP, terrible twosome, instead of, an F or whatever. And so the character became so cartoonish that it couldn't possibly have worked. And I worked as hard as I could to try to make the character work. But by that time, that's when the clique was running, the inmates were running the asylum up there. And they were pissed off at how dare Shane Douglas come in and tell us what we're doing right or doing wrong. It's a different way of doing business. They've made a lot of money doing it that way, but they've also, I think, half killed the business in the process. And I just personally disagree with the style. I wouldn't have watched WWF then. I wouldn't have watched WWF now, because to me it's just a cartoon that's not compelling. That's not to say there haven't been great performers there. They haven't had some great matches there along the way. When you have thousands of matches every year, you're bound to hit on a couple good ones. But to me personally, that product would not have appealed to me. My oldest son's 10 years old. He doesn't watch it. He's already tuned out of it. When I was 10 years old, I was glued to wrestling as a kid. You couldn't get me away from the television. So the business is obviously doing something wrong. And I think the Dean Douglas character personifies what they were doing wrong with the business, trying to create this character. Where that character came from, I walked into a room with the writers, and they sat there and looked at me, and I stood there quietly for like 10 minutes as they sat there rubbing their hands on their chins and turning their heads like dogs looking at me. And they had known that I'd been a teacher in the past and that I had an educational background and had a master's degree and was, accepted to medical school. So they said, well, let's make him the smartest man in the world, 7 PhDs. He's smarter than everybody. And this kind of ridiculousness that's so far from realism, that's what our business is missing today, is the realism. If you watch television, you watch shoot fighting, and you see all these other genres, they're all portraying what they say is real. Wrestling could do that and should do that. And instead we've digressed from it and walked away and allowed Vince to take it and Dixie to take it to these god-awful cartoon places that, again, guys, I'm 48 years old, guys my age, they're going to find 27 and a half other things to do besides go to a WWE wrestling show or a TNA wrestling show. They will go to an ECW show, an Extreme show. And that's what we have to bring back into business because, look, the demographic of my 10-year-old son's tuned out of wrestling and my 6-year-old son barely cares about it, then that's not a formula for success. That's not a formula for revolutionizing the business. What is a formula for it is bringing those people back that grew up watching wrestling 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 15 years ago, and 20 years ago back to the table. We plan on bringing those people back to the table.
Speaking of, while we're on Dean Douglas, quick, did you see John Laurinaitis on Raw this week? Because some people thought maybe it was like some kind of jab at you or the Dean Douglas character because he's wearing like a robe that was very similar, only it wasn't baby blue.
No, I didn't see it, but if Tony wants to take a jab at me, he should first learn how to talk. Because I can put a sentence together and I can do it compellingly and not like watching paint dry. So I love Tony, love the time I spent with him as a dude way back in the day. But look, I'll put my career up to his and I'll put the X-ray on either one of them. I'm very comfortable with the career that I've had as he was his.
Mm-hmm. It was very bizarre. I don't know. It probably went over everyone's head, but like me and like 10 people's. But thanks for calling in, James.
I got another question for Shane.
Well, we got a lot of people on hold here, so I'd like to get one each person if we can.
All right.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you, buddy.
Anthony.
Hello?
Yep. You got a question?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good.
Yeah, hey, Shane. How you doing?
How you doing, man? I didn't catch your name.
Anthony.
Hey, Anthony. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fine. Big fan for many years.
Thank you very much for watching. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I just had a quick question, playing devil's advocate. I just recently reread Mick Foley's book, A Good Friend of Yours.
Yeah.
And he said, I can't remember the quote exactly word for word, but it was something along the lines of that you were a talented guy, but sometimes you didn't live up to your potential because you were your own worst enemy. And that seems to be like the prevailing view of a lot of people that feel like you didn't get as high as you could have gotten in the business. What are your thoughts on that to your critics?
Well, yeah, that I believe that quote came from his first book. I agree with him in some ways. You know, I mean, look, if you're going to be controversial, you know, like Paul Stanley from KISS said one time, if you want to be a politician, don't bitch when you have to wear a tie. If you're going to be controversial, don't bitch about the controversy you create. And I've always planned on being controversial. You know, I'm a person that says what I think and think what I say, and I stand behind every bit of it. That in large part is what allowed the NWA title to be thrown down. You know, we could all sit and second guess and say this might have happened, this could have happened, that should have happened. My career, like I said, if I drop dead today, if I live to be another 500 years old, my career is ensconced. I mean, it is what it is. It's out there. You know, it's 30 years for people to look at a magnifying glass, and we could say it might have been this big, it might have been that small. Did he? You know, we could debate all day back and forth. I agree with him that, you know, at times in our business, when we were coming up, the last thing in the world you were allowed to do or expected to do or tolerated to do was to open your mouth and speak your mind. And I said, hell with that. I mean, look, I'm not going, the stuff that I've said, and I've said a lot of things over the years, not that I've been right on everything, but the stuff that I've said, I truly believed, and I've stood behind. I've never once had something to say out there and then say, well, here's what I actually meant by I shouldn't have said that, but I should have said this. And what I said was, and you've never heard me clarify any comment. I stand behind what I've said. And again, not that I was right on everything over the years, but I'm man enough to say that I said it, and I'll stand behind it. But I'll say this, over the years, I think the franchise character, the reason that anybody's talking about Extreme Reunion today, we did one video that we put out and said we're going to have another Extreme Reunion show, and Extreme should always reside in Philadelphia. And off of that, we've had an incredible amount of buzz, much more buzz than TNA has ever had for any show they've ever done, including their ECW reunion show. So, you know, again, we could debate it all night long, but I think that clearly there is something in the franchise character that you have to give, you know, confluence to, that there's things that have come together at the same point that have created this character, and certainly the controversy has been a big part of that. So I agree with Mick, but I also disagree with him. I agree with him that maybe I should have opened my mouth the times that I did. I may have made more money, but disagree in the context of my character is what it is. It's become a very well-known character in the professional wrestling business, and I'm thankful for the guys like you that have watched it over the years and followed it.
Yeah, because I was a fan of it, and I was just always curious that they brought you, I'm talking about Vince and them, they brought you in 95, and they really handicapped your character, because I knew from 94 to 98, you cut the best promos in the business, in my opinion. And then they have guys like Shawn and Hunter. They have guys like Shawn and Hunter cutting the same promos 2 years later. It's kind of like, do you feel like you kind of missed the boat a little bit by 2 years?
Well, it's, they say that imitation is the greatest form of flattery. I can honestly say I've never imitated anybody's promos. But I remember one time, and distinctively, that I was at the house. We had turned on Monday Night Raw. This is some years ago. And I walked into the kitchen to get something to eat, and I heard a promo that Hunter was doing on TV. And my brain was listening to it, but I wasn't, paying attention to it. I was just listening. I was hearing the words, but I wasn't paying attention to it. And I stopped about halfway through whatever I was making to eat, and I thought, wait, that sounds familiar. And I started listening to it from that point forward, and went, wait, that sounds familiar because that's my promo. That's the promo I did a few years ago. Now it is what it is. I think Hunter's an incredibly talented performer. You could say that about anybody had they lived up to their potential. I think Hunter is an intelligent enough guy he could have clearly gone out and done what the franchise character had done. But in that corporation, you're not allowed to. That's not expected. So, whether, if he was imitating me, great. Kudos, and to me that's a form of homage, and to me that's a form of respect. So, but it is what it is, and I'll leave it to the fans to decide whether it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down.
Thanks for calling in, Anthony.
Thanks a lot. See you on the 20th of April.
I'll see you there, man. Thank you.
Awesome. Was that frustrating when you guys would do something, in ECW, then they would pretty much do the same thing on WWE or Nitro, and to a lot of people who weren't seeing ECW, they'd be seeing it for the first time?
Well, it wasn't frustrating. I remember one time Tommy Dreamer coming to me and saying, what are we going to do? They're copying us. And I said, well, they can copy us, but they can't do what we do, because A, they were doing it 7 nights a week. We were doing it 2 nights a week. And I can tell you honestly, if I had to do it 7 nights a week, I highly doubt I could have done it. So I wasn't sure they could copy us in the protracted view. But the thing about the WWE was they were so pervasive. They were so strong. They were so identified and ubiquitous. So ubiquitously identified as the industry. When you talk to people about professional wrestling, oh, you mean like Vince McMahon, WWE, or WWF, whatever it's called then. And, so that was what we were contending with. I was solid in the fact that our fans were in our pocket, that they were loyal to us, and no matter what those guys up there did, they could only be pretenders to the throne. We were still the kings of extreme. And so, like I said a second ago, imitation is the greatest form of flattery. Vince made a lot of money, not by hiring writers from Hollywood or by hiring Vince Russo or by hiring whoever he hired. Whoever it was that he hired, whether it was Vince Russo or those writers from Hollywood, they copied the style that Paul Heyman laid down and that we had executed. So, from me to Vince McMahon on this fine January night, you're welcome for having been given the opportunity to make the money you did.
Let's see here, Brandon.
Hi.
How you doing, Brandon?
I'm doing well. How you doing, Shane?
I'm good, man. Real good. Hanging back here in Pittsburgh tonight, just spending my day on doing the PR stuff on the radio and having a good time talking to you guys. What's up?
All right, man. I just have a couple quick questions for you, and both of which are WC. The first one is, I know that you teamed with Ricky the Dragon Steamboat back in 1992 when Raw Championship Wrestling, and you guys were definitely one of my favorite tag teams. I'd just like to know could you explain how that all came about with you teaming with Steamboat? And also, what are your thoughts about your feud with the then Hollywood Blondes?
The second part, feud with who?
The Hollywood Blondes.
Oh, okay. The thing with Steamboat. The idea with Steamboat came about when when I originally signed with WCW back then. they were bringing me and Marty Jannetty in to do a new version of the Rockers. And Marty, unfortunately, had some legal problems right prior to us going in. He was the one that set the deal up, and right prior to us going in, he'd gotten in trouble. I'd not gotten in trouble. He had some kind of legal issue or something hanging over his head. And Kip Fry, who was running the company back then, was afraid to bring him in, so backed up, but he already had me on the way in. So they had half the equation and weren't sure what they were going to do with me. So I got there and sort of meandered about for a few weeks, maybe a month. And somebody, it was Bill Watts, who I'd worked for previously for a short time when he was running UWF, and I got my first break in the business back in '85, I believe it was. And so he was, I think, had followed my career to some degree and was aware of what kind of person I was and kind of a talent I was. And he was the one that originally came up with the idea of putting me with Steamboat. Now, Steamboat had worked with Dustin Rhodes and a few other people prior to that, and helped them become much better talents. And so I think that to Bill Watts, it was just a match made in heaven. We got this young kid with all this talent and potential. Let's put him with Steamboat and groom him and, you know, sign him up a bit and see if we can make him a main event talent. The original concept for the Hollywood Blondes, I'm writing about this in the book, but not many people know, the original concept for the Hollywood Blondes was me and Brian Pillman. And they wanted me to turn on Steamboat. Bill Watts called me to his office one day. I honestly thought he was going to fire me because I had no idea why he was calling me to his office. And when I got in there, he asked me what I thought about turning on Steamboat. And I thought about it, and as much as I loved the idea of getting the opportunity to work against Ricky Steamboat because he's an incredible babyface, in my book, the best babyface in the history of the business, I said to Bill, I don't think the fans will buy it yet. They still see Steamboat as a star and me as his partner, and I don't think the fans will buy it. And I think at that point, Bill Watts realized that I was starting to wrap my brain around the business a little bit. I understood it. I got it. And that's where Steve Austin then got the opportunity to get put in there. And I'll be honest with you, I think made a much better pairing with Brian than I probably would have. Not that Brian and I would have had any problems working together, but I think Steve and Brian were fantastic as the Hollywood Blondes. And it also gave me the opportunity to continue working and learning from Ricky Steamboat. And really, I grant, you know, that was being, or you know, look at that as being the point that Shane Douglas went from being a white meat, middle of the card babyface to being a main event talent. I learned so much from the 7 months I spent with Ricky. He was a gentleman. He was a true professional. He was a great teacher and a great guy. I mean, he's a great traveling partner. I had nothing but fond memories of traveling with Ricky and learning from him or working with him. He was a pro in every sense of the word, and I learned an inordinate amount from him. So when I went to ECW, I took everything that he taught me with me, but I still didn't know how to be a heel. At that time, my thinking was, well, you just do the opposite of babyface. Well, that's not exactly right, as anybody that's ever drawn money in this business will tell you. So I got extremely blessed at that point, no pun intended, to get angled with Terry Funk, who's arguably one of the greatest heels in the history of our business. And every night was a learning. Very different teacher from Steamboat, but still learn from him every night. And I credit those two part and parcel with creating a franchise character. I would have never been able to become the character that I became as the franchise had I not worked with those two at the points that I did. So that's where the whole idea for Steamboat and I came from, was through Bill Watts. And the Hollywood Blondes came from Steve Austin getting the opportunity after I turned it down to stay working with Steamboat. Loved working with those guys. They were phenomenal. The timing on our spots and everything with those guys was perfect. You never had to guess where they were going to be at any point. You knew where they were going to be. They were complete professionals.
Thanks for calling in, Brandon.
Oh, that's cool, guys. Thanks, Shane, for speaking with me, and I hope the rest of the interview goes well for you. Hope everything's perfect, man.
Thanks, man.
Appreciate it, man. Have a good night, buddy.
All right, you too.
Incher, did you have a question from the board?
Yeah, I had a question from the Blue Guy. He wants to know, what were your feelings on Ric Flair's comments he made on his shoot interview about you working for Target?
Look, I've grown up in a blue-collar family. I ain't afraid to work for $1. He should give it a try sometime. You know, for a guy who hasn't learned his lesson, you know, it's like some punk sitting in a comedy club trying to fight with a comedian. Shut up and just listen, because you know you're going to get your ass torn out of you. And I've done it to him several times before, and I'll do it again. You know, at one point he made a comment about me being a wife beater, and that's when I went to TNA and told Dixie Carter I'd work on the ECW pay-per-view only if they gave me Flair. Scared him so badly, he was called into the office and he said there was no way he'd ever work with me. Look, I'm sad for Flair. I'm sad that he's become a caricature of himself. I'm sad that he's gone bald. Not so much. I'm sad that he's a full-blown alcoholic at this point. I'm sad that he has to be in the ring even trying to make a living because he's lived his life so egregiously that he's had a revolving door of wives. If he wants to compare personal lives with personal lives, I will do that. I preface all that by saying there was no bigger Ric Flair mark on the planet than Shane Douglas. I broke into the business because of him. And, you know, much like I've read about people that have met heroes of theirs in the past, when I met him for the first time and then watched him consistently night after night after night after night after night and saw what a jackass he was as a human being, I was embarrassed that I even looked up to this guy. You know, for a 40-something-year-old man running up and down hotel hallways naked at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, to treating women the way that he did, to, you know, the drugs that he did. And you know, look, you know, I sat and watched him and several other guys snort cocaine for years in the dressing room. So, you know, if these are things that he wants to talk about, we can do it. You know, I mean, I'll sit down at a table with him and he can throw stick for stick and I'll play tat for tat. You know, it's none of us lead perfect lives, and I've certainly made my share of mistakes, but I will compare mine to Richard Flair's any day of the week.
Now, when you asked Dixie about working Flair at their ECW show, what was her answer?
Well, I didn't speak directly to her. Mm-hmm. She had Terry Taylor call, and I'd already conceived of the idea because I'd heard the comments that he had made about me being a wife beater and stuff. And look, you can find a police report anywhere, a comment even from my ex-wife, that there was ever any kind of problems like that. I'll be the first to say he was right. But there was never anything like that, never any kind of problem like that in our marriage. So to go out and make a comment like that, I should have just sued his ass and let him talk in court. But instead I allowed him to just go out and give him enough rope to hang himself and make himself continue to look like a jackass. This is a guy who should have the most storied career in the history of our business. He was the measuring stick of class and of professionalism in our business for years. And he goes through and you meet any young wrestler who's not afraid of losing their spot, or any wrestler that knows Ric Flair that's not afraid of losing their spot, and they'll tell you the same stuff I'm telling you. You know, these are not big secrets on the inside of our business. Secrets because they've kept him. Look, when I saw him one night in Norfolk, Virginia, not Norfolk, Richmond, Virginia, take a girl that Johnny Ace had met at the building that night. Her name was Marty. Big, tall, blonde, beautiful, long legs, sort of like Stacy Kibler legs. When she walked into the bar that night at the Holiday Inn at the airport, Johnny was still up in the room quaffing his hair, I guess you'd say, like a woman. And Flair beelined up to her. Now, the bar was full of kids. There were a ton of kids there. And I speak as a father today. I'd have knocked him out if I was in there with my kid, if I saw what he did. He took her, pulled her out on the dance floor, and the only way I can describe her physical language was that she looked like a woman being physically or sexually assaulted. She looked like she'd rather be anywhere else on the planet but where she was with him, and was looking for anybody to save her and help her. And when I got up to walk over to her, Wahoo McDaniel grabbed me by the back of the pants and said, "Leave it alone, kid." So minding my superiors in the business, I did, and I sat back down and I kept watching. I watched him proceed to try to kiss her. She kept turning her face until he grabbed her with both hands, kissed her on the lips, and her body went stiff as a board, her arms down to her side, went stiff as a board. He laid her down on the floor, and she had her hands balled up in fists up next to her face. She looked terrified. He pulled his penis out in the middle of this bar and started flicking his penis around with these kids all around. Jeez. Well, at that point, I'd seen all I was going to see. And I got up and he grabbed me again and told me the same thing. I said, "The hell I will." And I went down and knocked him into the bar, took her up to the room to Johnny. 30 minutes later, when I came downstairs, Arn Anderson was waiting for me in the lobby and said, "Kids, you know, you have a ton of heat with Nate." So I said, "Like, I give a shit. You know, I could care less." And then I asked Orrin, I said, Marty, let me ask you a question. If you had Barrett, his son who was 5 years old at the time, I said, if you had Barrett in that bar just now, how would you have felt about that? And he looked down his nose, like drooped his nose down, looked over glasses at me like, you know what I would have done. I said, exactly. How do you think those parents feel in there right now? Every one of those parents is looking at you and me, and they think we all act like him. And I wasn't going to have people look at me like that. So, again, I'll compare, I won't say my career surpassed it in any way. He was what he was. He was the nature boy. But on a personal level, the stuff that I saw as a young man growing up and thinking and being embarrassed at looking up to this guy, I was mortified at the stuff I saw him do night after night after night, and finally reached a point that I wasn't going to allow it anymore. Mm-hmm. I couldn't. And if that meant getting fired, oh, well, I'd get fired. But, my career went on with what it was going to become. And, I've got my dad used to have a saying, cream always rises to the top. And I was confident in my skills as a wrestler, not so confident in the politics of the business. So when ECW came along, I knew it was a match made in heaven. It was the Island of Misfit Toys. It was where I fit. And the rest is history, as they say.
Along those lines, if this takes off, the Extreme Reunion, you think this is a place, for guys like yourself at that time, and either young guys that don't have a place they can shine, for guys maybe want to reinvent themselves, and just guys that have no place right now?
All of the above. I mean, look, it was what it was then. A lot of the guys, the edict that we put out to everybody is get your butts in shape, get your problems in order, because there's something bigger at work here. And, we have bigger plans than just a show. We're relaunching a brand. And as long as the guys are healthy and shape and can go, they'll be figured into the storylines. The ones that decide to show up that night and after having imbibed on whatever it is they've imbibed on, they'll be escorted out the back door, and you'll not see them again. Look, every young kid, when Troy Martin was a young snot-nosed punk growing up in New Brighton, Pennsylvania, dreaming of being a professional wrestler, never having the cojones to believe I'd have the career that I've had. But I had the right to have it and make the mistakes that I've made and grow into the character that I became and draw the money that I drew. There are kids in this business right now as talented or exponentially more talented than I was. They have a right to have the same career without the politics of the business holding them back, without the drivel of the storylines being written by Russo or whatever Hollywood writer Vince McMahon has hired this week, to be able to go out and become the character that they're going to become. I feel strongly in that. And I look back and I think if there hadn't been an ECW, who would even be talking about Shane Douglas today? We need another ECW. We need another extreme company to restart that revolution, to bring some of that magic back for these kids in the business and for the fans. And that's my whole impetus to this entire project.
Mm-hmm. And I just want everybody to know that we have the link right on the website. It's extremereunion.net. And you go there, you find all the information, how to get your tickets. And you guys keep announcing new people on the show. Already you got a Sabu and Rhino, Just Incredible, Al Snow, Axel Rotten, the original Gangsters, New Jack and Mustafa, and there'll be more people added. Besides the live show itself, like if you're there in attendance, which if you can be there, that'd be the best way to watch. But is there any plans for internet pay-per-view or DVDs or anything like that?
Right now, all plans are on the table. There are plans for other ideas. None of them have been finalized yet. Our fans at ExtremeReunion.net will be the first to know them. But again, we're looking at it. I'm one of these Johnny-come-latelys to technology. I've resisted it as long as I could, and realized that the whole world was moving beyond me and past me. So, at my publicist urging and at my own desire, I've been wrapping my brain around Twitter, getting ready to launch Twitter. We've been on Facebook now for 2 years. I've got a great webmaster, Mike Petkovich, up in Chicago. I'm beginning to realize the power of the social media and all that it can bring. On Facebook, we've got, God knows how many, 15, 20,000, 25,000 people, whatever, on the 3 pages. But Twitter, from what I understand, reaches much further. We will communicate to the social medias and through programs like yours to get the word out for this show. I'm amazed at this point in 2005 when we were doing Hardcore Homecoming. We hadn't announced the card until I think 8 or 9 weeks out of the show, and we didn't put tickets on the site until 8 weeks out. So we've done this one differently, in large part because we wanted to make the announcement in the arena there on the last day. We felt strongly about getting that connection to the arena. And so we're a bit ahead of ourselves as far as plan goes. We're not trying to be coy or withhold information. We are currently in the process of reaching out to all the talent that's available, and everybody that's been contacted will tell you and verify for you. We told them get in shape. We don't want you out of shape. We want you healthy. We want you clean, and we want you to go out and perform like nobody else could do in the business before or since us. And to do that, to relaunch the brand, if they do what we've asked of them, we'll be successful in this endeavor as we incorporate new faces into it and continue on down the line. But this is a relaunching of the brand. This is not a trip down nostalgia lane.
Mm-hmm. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope it continues. It's a big success because I've been a wrestling fan my whole life, and I do this show every week. The last few years, I definitely don't watch as much wrestling as I used to. I would never think I'd miss any wrestlers on TV, but now you miss more and more. I agree with all you're saying.
So, again, let me turn the tables on you guys. Let me be the interviewer for a second because this is something I've done. I started doing the Comic-Con conventions and the wrestling conventions, which I had resisted for the most part of my career, for about the last year and a half or so. And I've been amazed at every single fan that I've spoken to, and you could probably talk to thousands that I've spoken to in the last few years. Every single one of them have told me, I thought that most of them had given up on wrestling, that they'd moved on to shoot fighting or other entertainment genres, and every one of them, 100% of them told me the same thing. We haven't given up on it. We're just holding our breath, waiting for that next thing to come along. Well, it's on its way.
Mm-hmm. I hope so. I heard you on another show, and you said on PW Insider, and there's things that pop up that get you interested in wrestling here and there, but overall, it's just not emotionally attached to it as I used to be.
Yeah, it's look, if we bring even a percentage of those fans back to the table, keep in mind that all those fans, let's say it's 30% that come back to the table to catch this. Those 30% ain't coming alone. They're going to bring their kids with them because their kids have grown up hearing these stories about ECW. My son's included. My son's only ever seen one match from ECW. I showed them Bam Bam Bigelow and Shane Douglas from Pittsburgh, 1997. I don't feel they're old enough yet to really see the whole product. Sometime they will. But those 30% that come back are going to bring their kids with them, their friends' kids, because they're just like I took my son to see Kiss a few years ago. This is something, if you haven't seen, who knows when the last tour will be? Maybe 10 years from now, may never, who knows? Mm-hmm. But definitely, there are certain things you want your kids to see. I think any true wrestling fan is going to want their kids to see, with as long as they're of a certain age, an extreme product. Mm-hmm. And so that number, if we can bring even 30% of them back, is going to be much bigger than 30%.
Mm-hmm. We do have a couple more people here on hold, if you wouldn't mind just asking a couple more answers.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. 609 area code, who are you? Been on hold here for a while. Speak up. All right. 570 area code.
That's Tim.
All right, Tim.
Since the plan for Extreme Reunion is to be more than a one-off show, have you considered doing cross-promotional or talent exchanges with other promotions in the area like Combat Zone or Ring of Honor?
We haven't broached that yet with any of the other companies, but look, I feel strongly, if you look back at my career, having come into wrestling at a time when there were 25 territories, that it's beneficial for every company involved to move the talent around. It keeps talent fresh. There are a few around, like Crossfire in Nashville is putting on an incredible product. Last week they outdrew anything TNA had ever drawn in that building. Big Time Wrestling up in Boston has signed deals with Augusta and Springfield Civic Centers up there, and last year drew over 3,000 paid to the Augusta Civic Center. So there are companies out there that are getting it right. We would love the opportunity to switch talent if our company takes off like we expect it will. And once we get it to a point where we're standing on our own 2 feet and the company becomes self-sustaining, to then look at their talent and do moving talent back and forth. I think the way the territories worked a million years ago was the best way for wrestling. This national product stuff, it's very difficult to keep a talent hot for year after year after year. Much easier when you can say, okay, Shane Douglas, we're going to send you to Big Time Wrestling for 6 months, and they're going to send us some of their talent down here for 6 months, and then some to Crossfire, and then some to Ring of Honor or whatever, moving back and forth. Absolutely, we would look into that.
That's awesome, man. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
James? James, do you have a question? You have a question?
Yeah, how's it going?
How you doing, James?
Doing good. Both me and my wife got our picture taken with you at a fan fest in Charlotte 2 years ago. I got mine taken with you. It was awesome. The Troy Orndorff character, when you started off, what was the plans behind it? Since you answered my original question of you debuted in '82, so I can shut it.
Well, the character was created by an old-time wrestler turned promoter. His name was Crybaby George Cannon, out of Ontario. I think it was out of Ontario, up in Canada. We had gone up there to wrestle, and at the time I was just wrestling under my real name, I think, Troy Martin. And he said, "Well, it just doesn't have a ring to it, you know." And he kept looking at me, and he said, "You look like Paul Orndorff." And I started laughing because I thought, at the time, Paul Orndorff was built like a Greek god, and I was a young kid. And he said, I'll think of something. Go ahead and go to the ring. So I go to the ring having no idea what they're going to announce me as. And the announcer announces me as the nephew of Paul Orndorff, Troy Orndorff. And that's where the character sprang from. And for years, until present, I occasionally get people ask me, "How's your Uncle Paul?" Well, I have an Uncle Paul. So it takes me like a brain fart to think, wait a second, are they talking about Paul Orndorff or Paul Leach, but that's where the idea came from. Was Crybaby George Cannon up in Canada, and I used that for some time on the independent scene before going to getting my break in the business.
Thanks, James.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Jared, is it the Subway guy?
No, it's a friend of his from Wrestle Reunion last year. Hey, franchise, see you in L.A., buddy.
We'll see you there, brother.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Jared. Let's see. We'll go more here. We'll go to Joel in Portugal.
Hello. Hello, Shannon. How you doing?
Joel, you there?
Yes.
I can hear him. Ask your question, and I'll repeat it for Shane if he can't hear you.
Okay. My question really quickly is, he's been wrestling around the world. Has there been a place that he enjoyed wrestling outside of the United States the most?
He wants to know, you wrestled all over the world. Is there any place besides the United States that you enjoyed wrestling the most?
I love going anywhere overseas. I've wrestled, all over Europe. I was just in Germany last year. Going to be in Germany again this year. I think in March or April. Italy was the first country I'd ever gone to overseas, and I loved it. It was fantastic back then. As a historian, I'm a history teacher, so as a historian, I love traveling to places like Italy and Germany and England and Japan, and knowing histories I know, and then going there and seeing these actual places, for me is fascinating. We were last year. The original idea for Extreme Reunion came up about a year and a half ago. Promoters from overseas, from Ireland, England, Germany, Italy, Japan, Saudi Arabia, Zaire, Nigeria, and a few other countries had come on Facebook to ask me would we be interested in bringing what they called hardcore homecoming over to those places. And the idea was cracked at that point. And when we started planning it, the logistics became so overbearingly difficult for just 2 or 3 people to handle that we had to put it on the back burner. We didn't shelve it. We didn't, just abandon it. We shelved it so that we could come back to it. And as of right now, we will be looking at bringing this company overseas to those same places, those same promotions that inquired last year. Once we get the machine built and once we get it running on all cylinders and humming along the way that it should, and Portugal would be a place I've never been to, but we'd love to bring it to Portugal. So absolutely. I love going any place overseas and experiencing the cultures, the people, just seeing, the United States is great. Don't get me wrong. I love it here. But it's just fantastic to get out and experience other cultures and other people and seeing the way that the world operates outside of the States.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Joel.
Thank you.
I want to ask you this because it was at the end of the TNA show where it was a tribute to ECW, and at the show ended where like they were like crying and thanking Dixie Carter. I don't know if you got to see this. I just want to get your take on that.
I didn't see it. The reason I didn't partake in the show, quite simply, was they would allow Flair what they're paying him. This must be the only industry that I'm aware of that allows the people that they pay $30,000-$35,000 per night to tell them what they will or won't do. So at that point, I knew that between that and then the money that they were offering, which was ridiculously low, I knew that I wasn't going to partake in it, and I felt very strongly in the sense that I didn't feel that Dixie Carter had a right to try to rape the legacy that we had literally buried half of our crew in graves on, and we had all broken our bodies and torn our bodies to hell on. And a woman who the first day I met her asked, why would I want to copy ECW after all they failed? And now it stands out from what I understand as the best pay-per-view buy rate they've ever had. Mm-hmm. She paid the guys so poorly for that show that, look, if you go back to Hardcore Homecoming and talk to anybody that worked on Hardcore Homecoming, they'll tell you that even though we had guarantees and contracts signed, we paid everybody that was on the show a bonus because the show did well. We felt very strongly that the talent should partake in as much of that success as anybody should. Why Dixie Carter, as the best best-selling pay-per-view TNA's ever done, couldn't contact, say, Justin Credible or Axel Rotten or Sandman or Sabu or any of the talents that wrestled there and say, hey, appreciate the great job you did. Here's a little bit of a bonus. But I guess for a billionaire's daughter, that's just an impossibility. To me, that's the way the business should be run. And look, Dixie and I have so many disagreements on so many different levels that it's really like there's no reason to even talk about it. I mean, her product is what it is. It's out there for people to take a look at and see. The numbers, to me, speak all they have to. For the money that they've spent and the comparison, like I said, the ECW comparison, the company that failed, according to her, still has life all these years later, and will continue to have life because it was a damn good product. It wasn't perfect. We had lots of mistakes and lots of screw-ups, but by and large, from beginning to end, Alpha to Omega, the fans that followed it believed strongly in it and followed it and supported it. You don't see anywhere near that fervor in her audience, and I think she admires that and wishes she had it. If the boys were out there, fanning, crying, or whatever. Look, I know the guys love the opportunity to get together every chance they get. And some of the guys, I don't fault anybody for doing it. Some of the guys needed the pay, right. and the pay would have been nice for any of us. But I've always been a man, for better or worse, a man of principle. And, sometimes the principles have been right and sometimes they've been wrong. But on this one, I felt very strongly that if she's asking us to come in there and kill ourselves the way that the ECW guys always do, to go in there and pay some of them $250 per day on pay-per-view, at the exact same time that she's paying a 60-year-old Hulk Hogan $70,000 per night and a 62-year-old Ric Flair $35,000 per night. To me, that's just disgusting that you're looking at Justin Incredible or Jerry Lynn or, fill in the blank, any multiple of that. So for me, it just wasn't going to happen. And there was nothing personal with any of the guys on the card. I love them all, respect them all, and look at the time that I spent with all of them is the best time of my career. But I could not go and allow her to partake in raping that legacy for a few bucks just because her product sucks so badly.
I could understand that it did so well on pay-per-view. It was I think it was the biggest one in years at the time, and then they just ended it. It was like, why would you even try it if you weren't going to keep going if it succeeded?
Yeah, God forbid something would work there. Why not have Team Extreme invade and have the all-out battle for TNA? I think what they were afraid of there was that people would rather have the Team Extreme than the TNA. Look, whatever reason they did it. I mean, the company at this point, they're over 7 years in business and have spent $150 million, and they're still getting the same paltry rating they've always gotten. At the same time, their expenditures have exploded to the roof to to Scott Fishman that runs Spike and any other television executive out there, come to Philadelphia, the National Guard Armory on April 28th, and look at what a product can be done when it's done properly, when it's done intelligently, and when it treats its talent properly and with dignity and professionally, and doesn't have somebody that has no idea what they're doing writing the storylines. And then ask yourself, you still want to be in bed with Dixie Carter? Maybe I should change that comment. Be in business with Dixie Carter, or if there's maybe something better out there for you. And if you come to Philly, my guess is we'll be talking business later that night.
Excellent. I just want to bring this up real quick. I saw it on your guys' Twitter page, and that was there is actually a fan petition to bring Paul Heyman to the show. And how do you get along with Paul Heyman?
I respect Paul Heyman. I think my relationship with Paul Heyman is what Paul Heyman has made it. I think Paul is an incredibly talented guy that wrote incredibly talented television and intelligent television shows. That had he not had the penchant and desire to be everything to ECW, that we would still be in business. Sadly, none of us, Joey Styles and myself and anybody else that was involved in the office at that time, none of us had any inkling that the company was in the sad financial shape it was in until it was far too late to even be considered to be saved. I fault myself, and I'm sure the other guys would say the same thing. But, Paul Heyman will always ring true to the fans, especially the ECW fans, as having been the guy that brought that to light and brought it to bear and brought it to market. But he also had a fairly talented crew to execute his storylines. Because you can be a great coach, but don't have the players to execute the plan, you're not going to succeed. Mm-hmm. We had an incredibly talented dressing room, and I credit Paul Heyman with the storylines, and I credit the talent with executing it the way that we did, and I credit the fans with keeping ECW running week to week, day to day, and every 3 weeks in the ECW arena. Because without them, at every step of the way, one bad night anywhere along that 7-year history could have spelled the end of ECW. So everybody was instrumental in the success of that company, and Paul Heyman certainly included in that.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, thank you for coming on tonight. It's been awesome. And again, it's extremereunion.net, Saturday, April 28th. And all the information on the website. Keep visiting the website because you guys will have new information up there all the time. Thank you for coming on, man.
Yeah, appreciate it. Good talking with everybody, and great for the calls, man. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, we had a lot of missed calls. Sorry we couldn't get to everybody, but maybe we'll get you back on sometime.
Absolutely. You let me know when.
Excellent.
This is the most missed wrestler in recent history, and I happen to be the whole effing show, Rob Van Dam. You're listening to me right now on InYourHeadOnline.com, because you know where the action's at.